Hey guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to another retro RPG. And at the end of another week, and the end of another poll, we've got an absolutely dominant win for Chromebook 4 for Cyberpunk 2020. Now, as usual, I'll be back at the end of the video with some other channel-related stuff and some other poll-related stuff. But we reminder that if you'd like to help the channel out, you'd like to see these videos a week early, you'd like to become a real honest-to-goodness fake Laird of Scotland, or some other options we've got, then there's a Patreon in the description down below. If you have a look at that and see what we can offer you, it'd be very much appreciated. But anyway, let's have a look at Chromebook 4. So, this is Chromebook 4, which came out in 1996 from our Talsorian games for Cyberpunk 2020, although the logo only says Cyberpunk. Now this is the fourth in the Cyberpunk style guides, and is very much back to what the first was, which is very much style. Whereas Chromebooks 2 and 3 had a lot more of full-body replacements, powered armour, and military gear, this is going very much back to the streets, and tonally is so much more cyberpunk than the others. Because while military gear and all that can be used by the bad guys, Cyberpunk very much is a game of style over substance. Because, let's be honest, your edge runners aren't going to be able to beat the large corporations. They're going to be going into the streets wearing some body armor, carrying an assault rifle, maybe. Whereas the corporations are going to be able to field battle tanks and giant mechs and all that against you. So you're not going to be able to beat them with sheer power. But you can brazen it out, you can brash it out, you can be all style over substance, pretending to be something you're not. And that's what Cyberpunk's kind of about. And this gets back to that, so it is very much on tone for Cyberpunk, one of my favourite of the 4 Chromebooks. Anyway, let's have a look at the back cover. RTG is proud to present this newest edition of the Cyberpunk World's must-have digital style guide, Chromebook 4. Included in this season's download, waiting for your cred stick. The biggest vehicle selection ever. Everything from town cars to armoured cars, plus new trucks for nomads, the latest showroom AVs for sport and utility use. One of the biggest software catalogues in the history of the Chromebooks, including some recently discovered Bartmoss Specials. Fashion makes a return in this year's Chromebook. The top labels are profiled and the latest trends highlighted for your edge runners, styling and profiling. We add new guidelines for armouring and layering your outfit, and can keep the edge without losing the chill. Our Cyberware section showcases new models, upgraded Soviet retreads, and the best from the lost issues of interface. When you want the style and need the substance, whip out your cell phone and reach for the Chromebook, your one-call stop for Cyberpunk life. Now, a couple of things in that. Lost issues of interface. I didn't know there were lost issues, but this does seem to borrow some cyberware and other technology from the interface magazines that we did cover. So I'm not sure whether they mean that there were issues which were published or supposed to be published, which they just lifted the content from and added it to this, or that the interface magazines are now lost because they're out of print. I'm not quite clear on that. But there's a lot in here. Now, while it says the biggest vehicle section ever, one of the steps back in this book is there's a lot less art. So lots of the vehicles are just text descriptions. But let's have a look inside. Inside, the artwork is very high quality. Lovely stuff. Our Talsorian games always provide very evocative artwork. So we've got table of contents, but we're straight into cyberware and chipware. The Extra Twist Joint Edition. Digit cyber fingers, replaceable cyber fingers with different equipment mounted in each. Corvette cyber legs. Medical modular hands. Stealth foot. Extending leg units. Soviet cyberware, so different cyberware which is a bit more clunky because the Soviet Union produces stuff as powerful as the rest of the world, but it is more primitive in its operation. New teeth and power jaws. New throat, so allow you to do different vocalizations and sound effects. The Kuroshi Monovision, so you can be like Cyclops or Robocop. A big rip, a blade which comes out the side of your arm. double slit pupils, allowing you to see differently below water and above water. The palm bomb. As you can see, many of these don't have any image, so we are just going by the text descriptions. Dermatech logo line tattoos. The Blitzkrieg arc thrower. Echolocation system coprocessors. TV skin. A big page of different things with no images. Chip locks, shape recognition chipware. Face down chip, spreading chip, dream suppressant chips. BioWare and nanotech. So advanced muscle and bone lacing. Skeletal replacements. Hemological replacement. Neoappendix. Now I like the way they've laid this out, showing you where these organs go. And although it's reusing the same image for the layout of the human body over and over again, I do like the fact that it's kind of illustrating what's getting replaced. Nano auditory rebuild, sunblocker sunscreen, which is the skin. We've got neo lungs, a very 80s hairstyle on the model of the female character here. And neural bridges, circulatory sphincters, poison glands, tailored pheromones, secondary gut, bioreconstructing, hemofibrinic nodes, toxin screens, flashlight implants, ileoleak, I can't even attempt to pronounce that, a siphon of some kind, physiology tailoring and adaptations, bioenhancement, tablet treatments, and then we're into the vehicles. Now, as I said, only a few of these are illustrated. Many of them are just text. So we've got the Mitsubishi Canada, which I'm guessing is probably supposed to be like the Akira bike, if it's Canada or Canada. The Bakushin, which seems to have small wings on the back. Honda Trail. BMW Volksrad, which is kind of strange that more responsive than a Volksrad, but then the Volksrad's the next thing on the page. The Tetsuo. The Cohort. Sierra Hatches. Mitsuzuki Bushi. Now, rather oddly, I think this image should have been swapped with something else in a couple of pages, but we'll come back to that. Gazlada Cossack, so Russian-built vehicles or Neo-Soviets. The Makdus Monster. Kundalini Roadworks Bedouin Truck, so lots of stuff for your nomad characters. The McLaren Jaguar XJ220 Police Interceptor. A revival of the 1990s design using 2020s tech. Now, I'm not much of a car buff. I have a very average car, which gets me from A to B. I've had it for quite a few years now. I don't much care about them, as long as they get me from A to B. But the XJ220 from the 90s is one of the most beautiful cars I've ever seen, and I really know what it looks like, and it does not look like that. You could convince me that that is an updated version, but that is like a dune buggy or something and bears no resemblance. If I remember in editing, I'll put a picture of an XJ220 up here somewhere, or probably up here because it makes more sense for comparison. But the XJ220 does not look like that, so why label it? You could easily swap the descriptions round or the images round and convince me that you were doing an up-to-date version, but you've done a car which looks nothing like the original. Anyway, we've got Autotech Spirits, long noses, military vehicles, aerodynes, the British Aerospace AV FAB. Well, FAB's from Thunderbirds, and it does mention this has a resemblance to Thunderbird 2 from an old 20th century flatbed. And I suppose it kind of does. It has the roll bar. It looks a bit... It doesn't have the massive pod which Thunderbird 2 had. McLaren Jaguar Sports Aerodyne. Then we're on to Netgear software and... Netgear and software. So we've got the gloves and goggles interface. So before people would jack in, they would use these kind of things. Hotkey keypads. And different programs. Mirror, Weed, Ninja, Redout. Audiovirus, Igor. Guest books. a picture's worth, Scribe, just loads of software. And then we're onto the fashion section. Now, to me, these fashions look a lot more 90s. The haircuts look more like the 90s, and that's rather weird to me, because Cyberpunk was a game of the 80s, and even up to this day, Cyberpunk 2077 in that is the 1980s but futuristic, and this is the 1990s but futuristic. But I like to see that the fashion evolved with the times. You know, these look very 90s, the floppy hairstyles, the rollerblading. These are not 80s designs, these are 90s. But there's some very nice fashion. It's nice to see them, you know, what business wear looks like. You know, edge runners, very floppy hair there. High fashion, including apparently transparent pantaloons. Glowing jackets. Really cool stuff. We've got basic costs for different types of clothing. General fashion and armor info, so you can start to layer armor. If you're wearing like a bulletproof vest with an armored jacket over it, it'll be better than just one of them by themselves. Then we're on to generic equipment. So echolocation goggles, pressure triggers, protective headgear inserts, motion tracker, which looks more than a little like the motion tracker out of Alien, Kevlar backpacks, plug-in air fowlers, Cygenics machine, Interflex Prime. If you prefer leisure to hard work, still want a superior physique, Bodyweight offers the Interflex Prime. And then we've got price lists and an index. We've got an advert for all the books which are out for Cyberpunk 2020 and Cyber Generation. And then an advert for a Cyberpunk 2020 book, The Revengers, which I don't remember the novels coming out. Obviously, I actually preferred the Shadowrun novels and followed them. But Stephen Bilius is a name I recognise. I can't remember where from. So they were getting some names involved. And that's Chromebook 4. As I said, it's kind of taking the timeline forward into the 90s. So it's neo-90s instead of neo-80s. And getting back to the core of what Cyberpunk is, all about style, all about fashion, all about making a character as cool as possible before they get blown away by a massive corporation. I very much recommend this book, far more than Chromebook 3. And while Chromebook 2's got a lot of cool stuff in it, I think Chromebook 1 and 4 are the best two out of the series. So that was Chromebook 4, and that absolutely dominated the poll this week, winning with some 42% of the vote, way ahead of everything else. In fact, in second place was Fading Suns D20, which got only 18%. The Darklands sourcebook for the Lone Wolf role-playing game came in on 16%. The Black Furies Tribe book for Werewolf the Apocalypse came in on 14%. And the Reformation Coalition Equipment Guide for Traveller of the New Era got only 11%. So an absolute dominant win for Chromebook 4, and great to finish off that series because that's us covered all 4 of the Chromebooks now. Anyway, those are cleared out and we're heading back to a Retro Adventures poll. So this week I'm letting everything back in because I've kind of skipped Dungeons & Dragons and Shadowrun stuff on the last couple of polls because they do tend to dominate the polls to give other things a chance. Anyway, this time everything's back in, so we've got The Keep on the Borderlands, a Dungeons & Dragons adventure from 1979. One of the absolutely iconic starting adventures for Dungeons & Dragons. It'd be lovely to cover that, something going way back into the history of role-playing. We've got City of Angels for Twilight 2000. Now, I covered a Twilight 2000 adventure fairly recently, and they're very cool stuff with open world mechanics in them, letting players pretty much choose what they want to do. It'd be nice to see if that carries on across all adventures. Then we've got Queen Euphoria, a Shadowrun adventure from 1990. Absolutely iconic. Me and my friends had a whale of a time playing this. So many good memories of playing Queen Euphoria. I'd love to share that with you. Next up, we've got Other Space for Star Wars. Now this is a bit of an odd one for Star Wars because it takes you out of the universe into a parallel dimension. But it's a really good adventure. I've played it myself and I've run it twice. I really count it as one of the most interesting adventures, one of the most useful ones, because it all begins with a hyperdrive malfunction, so you can slot it in all over the place. And finally, we've got the Masks of Nalhotep for Call of Cthulhu. Now this is perhaps the most Call of Cthulhu campaign there is. Came out in 1984, although it's the 1996 third edition that I'll be covering. But it's so iconic for Call of Cthulhu, basically setting the adventurers or the investigators searching around the world to defeat one of the Elder Gods' plans. Absolutely brilliant stuff. And other stuff, well, the Discord's continuing, we're chatting a wee bit in it. And as I mentioned last time, we've expanded out the Patreon levels, including the new librarian status, where I share some of the documents or some of the articles out of the magazines from the Retro Magazine episodes. And there's some really interesting stuff in there, and I would like people to join in the chat, because I don't want to just be looking at this stuff, I want to get other people's views on it. So check out the Patreon, it'd be very much appreciated. But apart from that, the site is continuing, so rpggamer.org. I'm continuing putting up the Dungeons & Dragons monsters that I created for my kids campaign. They're based on Scottish mythology and folklore, because I wanted to give the campaign that particular tone of where the kids came from. So I'm sharing some of those monsters, and some of them are pretty interesting, but again, I'd love to see people's comments, so check out the site and let me know what you think. Apart from that, there's nothing else, so I think I've whittled on for quite long enough as usual. So thank you very, very much for watching. But as always, most of all, you look after yourselves. And I'll catch you later. Bye now.